and welcome to Pipes and Pondering. Some of the most difficult moments in life are when people have to make extraordinarily tough choices. And I find that during those times, there are really two extremes that people can go towards concerning advice. You have some people who rely solely on the opinions of others, that this is where my parents told me I should go to college, or this is the type of person that my friend group wants me to date. Versus on the other end of the spectrum, you have people who completely refuse to take any advice whatsoever. That they don't care what their parents say about where they go to college or what sort of occupation that they have, because it's ultimately their choice. They don't care what their friend group says about the person that they're dating, because once again, it's ultimately their choice. And I think that both of these extremes wind up missing out on key realities. The first side, the one that relies solely on others' opinions, misses out on the need of personal agency. Ultimately, it is your choice. It is a person's choice to choose where to go to college, what job to have, what person they choose to date or marry. But on the opposite side, if you only are concerned with personal agency and neglect to take counsel or advice from people, then you're going to wind up disregarding the need for wisdom, understanding that there are people who are older than you, or people that are sometimes just further removed from your situation that are able to see more clearly. And in some extreme cases, you might also be denying the existence of morality. I think that a good balance between these two extremes is seen in J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. Throughout these books, you have a variety of characters that have extraordinarily wisdom. Obviously, Tolkien has a very definite moral order, that there's a very strong sense of right and wrong. But at the same time, the wise don't have clear-cut answers for actually most things throughout the narrative. The first point to realize is that the wise understand that there are extreme limitations with knowledge. Galadriel says, towards the end of the first book, that seeing is both good and perilous. Just because you have knowledge of something that's occurring doesn't necessarily tell you what your next action should be. You might have a better sense, or you might not. Just seeking knowledge is not in itself a good thing. There are certain things we should know, obviously, but also certain things that we shouldn't know. And it's vital that the wise understand this. Gandalf, arguably the wisest figure throughout the entire narrative, also gives a hesitant warning against judging people concerning actions that aren't inherently moral or immoral, but to wait to pass judgment. He says this when he's talking to Frodo concerning Gollum, and how Bilbo chose in the prequel The Hobbit to not slay Gollum. Gandalf says to be hesitant to not judge Bilbo for not choosing to kill Gollum, even though it would have saved Frodo and a number of other characters a variety of troubles. But Gandalf says, yes, Gollum deserves death. Many that live deserve death, and some that die deserve life. Can you give it to them? Then do not be too eager to deal out death in judgment. Gandalf acknowledges that obviously you have extraordinarily evil people who do deserve death, but that doesn't mean you should just go dealing it out constantly. And even the wise cannot see all ends, that you live in a fallen world, and because of that, we need to be cautious whenever dealing out any sort of judgment. This is something that's vital for characters within the Lord of the Rings and their perception of wisdom. Is just because they're wise doesn't mean that they have a say in everything. In fact, they should be extraordinarily cautious when choosing to use their influence. That's actually a part of their wisdom, because they realize that ultimately there is a very dangerous side to wisdom and wanting to overexert your own personal influence. This is seen through both Gandalf and Galadriel, who are both offered the ring at various points. And they both realize that power in and of itself is extraordinarily intoxicating, especially for the wise who have some sort of legitimacy to that power. That Gandalf obviously would be a much more effective wielder of the ring than Frodo Baggins, but Gandalf argues that's actually why he shouldn't wield the ring. When offered the ring from Frodo, Gandalf says, "Do not tempt me, for I do not wish to become like the Dark Lord himself. Yet the way of the ring to my heart is by pity. Pity for weakness and desire of strength to do good." We see here, first of all, as I mentioned, that Gandalf understands that the wise are sometimes the most liable to be the ones to misuse power. And the most horrifying part of it is that it's not initially something that's immoral. Gandalf says that he would wind up using that power to do good. He would use pity. He would wind up trying to help and save the people around him. But ultimately, that power would grow and fester inside him. And that would cause him to become an absolutely terrible dictator. In fact, that word terrible is something that Galadriel winds up using. She says that if she wound up accepting the ring, that she would wind up being great and terrible. That she would be loved, but she would be more feared than loved. And one final point about Tolkien's wise characters is that because of the points that we've talked about previously, the fact that the wise realize that they have limits, and that means that they need to be extraordinarily cautious when giving advice. The advice of the wise is oftentimes vague. And Gildor, an elf that comes in earlier in the Fellowship of the Ring, talks about this to Frodo. Frodo laments that the advice of the elves is oftentimes useless because the elves will say both yes and no. Gildor responds by saying that advice is a dangerous gift. Because it's a dangerous gift, you should be extraordinarily cautious when handing it out. Gildor mentions, "Elves seldom give unguarded advice, for advice is a dangerous gift, even from the wise to the wise, and all courses may run ill." That the best advice that can possibly be given doesn't necessarily assure success. Yes, we should obviously give moral advice and understand those moral absolutes, things that are clearly good or evil. But when it comes to which career am I going to find the most joy in, or precisely which person should I necessarily choose to marry, that no one can foresee what will actually happen. Even if you choose the best spouse possible for you, you don't know if something's going to wind up occurring to them or occurring to you potentially. That the wise can't see everything that's going to wind up happening. And that's the danger when people completely give over their agency. That they view the wise as sort of gods that can control everything and dictate every single outcome, when that's not really the case. Gandalf mentions that even the wise cannot foresee all ends. As we wrap up, let's talk about the application of the need for both advice and personal agency. The first bit of application is to be cautious about people who claim to know precisely how things are going to transpire. That we see this with economics, with everyone from Bill Gates to Elon Musk, people who try to have their hands in a number of different fields and claim to know precisely what's going on when they obviously don't, right? They obviously have specialties in certain fields, but even in those fields, that doesn't mean that they know 100% what's going to occur. We should also understand that if you completely give away your agency to those around you, then that means you're not taking personal responsibility. Whatever decisions are made in your life are ultimately your choice. They're your responsibility. If they turn ill because you made illegitimate or morally wrong actions, that's your fault. If it's a choice that isn't moral but is just trying to make the wisest decision, that's also the result of your own personal choice. And as people, we need to be willing to take that agency upon us, because that's the agency that everyone is dealt. That we are not supposed to know precisely what's going to occur. We are called to seek advice from those around us that we trust and make our own choices. I think that the moments that I've been helped the most when trying to make hard choices has been when mentors have used phrases such as, "This is what I would do," after talking me through all the various moral options, right? Explaining which ones are immoral, then pointing me towards all the moral options. And then once weighing the good and bad, they would say, "This is what I do," right? So much like Gildor, in the sense that he's not telling Frodo what to do, but what he would personally do. And these mentors realize that it might not be the best choice, but it's potentially the best choice you could make for hopefully the best outcome. And that's really all that we can hope for, is to make sure that we act wisely, that we act morally. And it's through that wisdom and through that morality that we can strive for the best lives possible, both to aid ourselves and to aid others. But what do you think about this balance between personal agency and receiving advice from others? Do you think this is a helpful way to view it? Go ahead and share your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.